Serious Sam, the Second Encounter VR. Let's have at. I recently reviewed Serious Sam, the First Encounter, so make sure you check out that review. They are so similar that I'm really just going to focus on the differences between them, rather than ramble on about the things I've already discussed in that review. They're both really good games and have better movement and gunplay than pretty much anything out there in VR right now, especially on the more arcadey end of the spectrum. So this review comes down to which one you should buy first if you want to have a go on Serious Sam, or if you've already bought the First Encounter, is it worth picking up this one too? It's worth saying that these are VR versions of HD remakes that came out within about 5 months of each other on Steam. They both utilise the same menus, options, guns, textures and so on. So, what's new in the Second Encounter? This time Sam visits 3 locations. You have a South American Aztec or Mayan type locale, you've got Persia, and you end it all in a pretty dark medieval location. Contrastingly, the First Encounter was set entirely in Egypt, which wasn't initially their plan, but a lot of content was cut. Each area has its own boss, and each time you start a new area, you lose all your weapons, just because. This means that each of the 3 locations ramp up at their own pace, and that the amount of things attacking you at once rises and falls throughout the game. The difficulty of course increases from start to finish as well, so you'll be expected to do more with less in the later areas. The fact that you get your guns taken away from you is both a nice mix-up and a bit of a pain. That's all down to what the game throws at you. It's exciting to be on the verge of death, but it's not always the most fun having sounds of clear skeletons thrown at you. Yes, that's what they're called. Or poxy amounts of marsh hoppers dripping in slowly. One of the only real gripes I had with the First Encounter was a few issues with pacing. They still happen. The fact that you have your guns taken away, at times, definitely exacerbates this problem. The Second Encounter is a longer and more fleshed out game. I'm not sure how much I agree with these numbers because I think they might be a bit on the low side for the Second Encounter, but it's definitely longer, and individual levels have a much greater chance of being epics where you're expecting it to come to an end 2 massive fights ago. Thankfully, as far as the big fights that you expect to be the end of a level but aren't, these aren't part of the problem. It would really suck if they were, because the pure chaos is where most of the fun is had. It's actually the day-to-day grind aspects of Sam's life, going between these fights, where sometimes the constant drip feed of specific enemies, or not really challenging but quite annoying wave after wave of clear skeletons, can become a bit of a bore. So, for this point of comparison, I'd say that for pacing, the Second Encounter has lower lows, but it also has higher highs for the big fights. Generally, there were more frequent set-piece fights in the Second Encounter, and a few more scenarios where considerations like weapon choice and your accuracy could really make the difference between being able to save your new Screen Cleaner 5000 bomb or having to regrettably expend it, not knowing if something bigger was just around the corner. The bigger fights just felt better balanced, and more reliant on you being a bit tactical. On the topic of new items and whatnot, you get a sniper which is fun to wield as a pistol and decent to use as intended, if a little bit tricky during the heat of battle. And there are pretty frequent damage and speed power-ups that definitely contribute to the more involved fight tactics. Do you save them? Do you use them straight away? It's good stuff. Whilst the Second Encounter does strive to be an epic more than the First Encounter, it hasn't lost its sense of humour. It's very lowbrow stuff, but Sam still chucks out one-liners.
Man, it's cold. My nipples are like pencil erasers.
And there are a bunch of weird quirks. For example, this little guy.
Oh my god, you killed Blondie.
Or the fact that one of the later snowy stages alternates between Christmas music and something reminiscent of a Star Wars theme. Clearly, a lot of fun was had making the game. It's not hard to maintain enthusiasm even through the excessive in a bad way moments, when each environment has its own music, its own visual flavour, and its own special combination of enemies to eviscerate. I really like the scenery, same as in Egypt. I think it's rare to not have at least a little interest in civilizations as cool as the Aztecs and Persians. And who doesn't like a good castle? Another minor change is a bit more interesting platforming. Mostly not clunky. Don't get your hopes up or down for some serious hopping, but there is a bit more of an emphasis on varied level design here. Next up, there's the bosses. The bosses in the Second Encounter Pretty much just worse. Though, this is a bit of a contentious point for me, because there are more fights with normal enemies that feel like a mini-boss. I actually really liked all of the bosses too, but I also beat them all first time, except one took 2 tries because there was a slight puzzle element. They were really not taxing enough. In some cases, easier than the fight that came just before, but they were really fun. So I think the main problem with the bosses is that they felt more like a power trip for Sam, with ample ammo and power-ups rather than a face-off with a new, exciting, powerful enemy. I genuinely thought that the final boss was a mini-boss before the real final boss because I beat it so quickly. The final boss of the first encounter was better in pretty much every conceivable way. I got to have a go on the multiplayer, and honestly I'd say that if you want to do co-op with someone, it's a good time. But if you want to play deathmatch, it's basically a crappier version of games like Unreal Tournament and Quake, and the novelty of VR didn't really help to get that out of my mind. The weapon balance and feel is really good for single player and co-op, but in a competitive environment, given the projectile speeds and player movement speeds, the more fun and skill-based weapons such as the rocket launcher just feel bad. At close range, spamming someone down with a sawn-off, and at mid to long range using the minigun and Tommy gun are just far simpler and more effective ways of killing people. The grenade launcher could arguably be strong because of the faster projectile speeds and the ability to take your enemies down from round a corner. Really, it's just not great, and it puts you at a disadvantage. Even if you had a rockets only server, it wouldn't work. The guns just aren't balanced well for it. The rockets just travel way too slowly, you can easily react to them, so you'd end up having to stand really close to each other to guarantee a hit. Not fun. Overall, I think that's really it. It boils down to a choice between the shorter and in some ways sweeter first encounter, or a considerably longer, more varied game, but with more sections that just feel a bit bloated. If I absolutely had to choose one game over the other, I'd lean slightly towards the second encounter, because of the improvements to the big fights, which to me are the lifeblood of Serious Sam. That said, with the cross-buy discounts, I'd probably rather buy the first encounter, then if I wanted to go for more, I'd go in for the second encounter, because it would be nicer to tackle them in that order, than vice versa. So that's it. Really, you can't go wrong with either. The first and second encounter are both brilliant games that are made even better with VR. I love Crow Team, and I love The Last Hope. Hopefully they'll have a new planet out for that shortly. Check out my other 2 Serious Sam reviews, and if you like my content, make sure you let me know with a like, and subscribe for more. Did my review make you think a thing? Comment that thing below, and I'll see you next time.